Alrighty, let me move my headphones so that they're in the right place. Hello, this is a recording for March. Let's see, today is, well, April is 2nd, so it would have been March 30th. Sounds about right. The Wednesday of that week. We are doing this as a recording. Super sorry that I was not able to make it to class this week. I was totally fine. Everything was good. And then my brother was like, hey, I really need your help on this. And I was like, oh, no worries. I got plenty of time. 35 minutes out, I was like, hey, you still need my help. And like, I'm going to have to go real fast because I'm going to have to let her know that I can't make it. So I appreciate you being willing to let me just do a recording this week. And as far as rescheduling next week, I will send you a text message about that. I think my Friday is fairly clear next week. I can't do any other time during Wednesday that I'm pretty sure of. But I can probably make sometime during Monday work as well. Like either of those should hypothetically work. So, but I'll send you a text message about that so you don't have to worry about trying to remember that from a recording. Today we're gonna jump in. We are picking up. I'm actually gonna show you this on my screen here a little fast. Love this about. All right. So according to my highlighted option within the syllabus, we're starting up with class 22, which is supposed to be a review of the pronoun placement that we started talking about, and then talking about the relative pronoun which. We've actually already had a conversation about the relative pronoun which, so basically view this week as kind of some review because we've already jumped into talking about how to use different pronouns in French anyhow. But review, la révision, comme on dit en français, is always good. So that's where we're at. Let me not stop share, but new share and create un tableau, as we say in French, en français. All right, so here's our handy dandy whiteboard. Les verbes pour aujourd'hui, ce sont garder et jouer. If I remember correctly, we are just continuing with the concept of doing the verbs as we're going through the material, and we're not trying to stay on quote task with those. We're not doing like April 2nd verbs. We're doing with 22s. So that would be garder et jouer. Now, jouer, you mentioned last week, was one that you've actually seen before. I always love when you have those moments where you're like, oh, I'm making a connection here. Jouer means to play. It can mean a variety of different things. You can play a game. Jouer. You can play an instrument. Let's see. Un piano, une guitare. Or you can play a sport. Now, it's interesting to note that in French, when we talk about playing an instrument, we will say jouer à la or à le, which is going to become au, or right? So, jouer à la guitare, jouer au piano. And then if we're going to talk about a sport, it's going to be a combination of de plus le, la, or les. So, jouer du foot, that means to play soccer. Just an interesting note. If you come across that in Duolingo, that is how you're supposed to say it. How do you remember that? Well, it's just one of those things where you see it enough, you internalize it, you realize that's what you need to do. So I would just roll with that note. That's out there. Garder means to guard. That's its main translation. I'm sure there are some other options for what that verb can mean. I want to say that I remember it meaning something along the lines of, since you're guarding something, it can also mean you like keep something. Ce sont les verbes pour aujourd'hui. Those are the verbs for this week. All right, garder, to guard, to keep, jouer, to play. All right. Oof, sorry, my allergies are acting up today. Those are the verbs. So you asked me a question, and I'll clarify here real fast. At this point, since you know présent de l'indicatif, or we would say present tense in French, and then also passé composé, which is past tense, I want you to go ahead and start conjugating your verbs into both tenses to get you in the practice of using both tenses so that you're comfortable with them. I think also, as you're able to, one thing I would encourage you to do, and one thing that my dad really encouraged me to do as well, which is why I encourage my students at this point, go back and review your verbs as you're able to, because you'd be surprised how easy it is to just forget that you even knew a verb that meant that. And then also the other thing that he really encouraged me to do, and I really encourage my students to do, is after a while, after you've become comfortable enough with the patterns of how to conjugate these verbs, start trying to do it without looking at your French verb book. Now, have your French verb book there and ready to go. But one thing he really encouraged me is once I started figuring out the patterns, which we've talked about how to conjugate ER, IR, and RE verbs, right? Once you've reviewed those patterns enough, and once you know how to use them by repetition, which is why I have you conjugating verbs every week, see if you can give it a try without looking at your notes. And it might be a little tricky at first, and you might have that moment of, oh my gosh, most of this is wrong. That's okay. This is learning a new language. This is how we roll with this. But really kind of forcing your brain to think outside of the box sometimes is a really good way to learn a language. So that's a suggestion I throw out to you as well. So garder, to guard, to keep, jouer, play. Again, I'm gonna let you look those up in your book, but do be doing présent de l'indicatif and passé composé. So conjugate both verbs. Put this on the board. Hello, come on. There we go. Conjugate both. Present. So I can't type. You've probably figured that out about me. I need to move around here just a tad bit too, so a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so conjugate both in present and past tense. All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. So those are our verbs for today, or rather this week. I'm gonna let you have fun with those. While we are on the topic of review, let's look back over what we talked about last week, which I should have my notes here. Let's have a look, see at what we learned last week. Sometimes it's hard for me to remember, so there we go. All right. Last week we talked about we talked about what we call demonstrative pronouns. Demonstrative pronouns? No, sorry. Demonstrative adjectives. Big difference, isn't it? Demonstrative adjectives is very different. So, demonstrative adjectives. These guys are fun, right? We're talking about combinations of ce, cet, c'est, or sets. All right. Those mean either this or these. And you'll remember the little endings, si, la, là-bas. So I'm gonna give you a second. I want you to pause the recording and try to remember what these mean without looking back at your notes. Again, this is like kind of that opportunity to kind of push your brain to that next level of, I've got notes, they're there if I need them, but also like I should try not using them. And you're sitting there going, gee, thanks, Mary Hannah. This is great. You're making my brain hurt. Well, we've been doing French for what? 20-something weeks at this point. This is about the time that I start pushing my French students a little bit more and say, hey, Get outside of your comfort zone. Try some new things. Let's give this a shot. It might look horrible and messy and awful, but we can do it. And it'll get less messy the more we do it. So give it a try. Again, first couple weeks you start doing that, you might very well be like, I don't remember squat without the notes, and that's okay. That's what they're there for. So see, when we add it to the end of ce plus a noun, right, means here. It's a distinction of this versus that, if you recall. La means there, and so that's going to mean that. And then là-bas is something like over there is the best way that we can describe it. So we use these in formula like this. Any form of ce, okay, so I'm going to use this one for an example, but again, it can be any form. Ce plus a noun, fill in the blanks there, right? And then we're going to add the little ending, whichever it may be. I'm going to add C here, just be, use that as an example. But this is the formula that we have to indicate this, that, these are those, right? So with that being said, I want you to try to see if you can make this sentence for me, right? Or not a sentence, I'm just going to stick with a phrase here today. This dog here, all right, I want you to see if you can come up with that one. Now remember that oftentimes those endings for us aren't understood in how we're like pointing or gesturing. You are going to want to keep an eye out for the word that we use in English. This is an indicator that something's next to me. So here, those is like not within my reach. And so that's usually an indicator that you're going to use what? You want to use la, because it means there, that, those. All right. Right. Okay. Those rabbits this line actually. All right. Take a second, come up with those, pause the audio, work through it. Make sure that you're using the appropriate form of ce. So determine the gender of the noun. That's going to determine which form of ce you use. And then choose the ending that needs to go after it. Okay. It's late here. All right. So hopefully you paused the audio. You had a chance to kind of try this out. It should have looked something like that. All right. You got anywhere close to that? Huzzah. Nicely done. Very impressed. It's a big deal trying out a new topic, right? So this was last week. Le révision. All right. So for this week, here's what we're going to talk about. We will be jumping into the idea of direct object pronouns. So concept of direct object pronouns. Here we go. Let me change to another color. Dark green it is. We break it down like this. You ready? A direct object pronoun is the receiver of the action of the verb. We can determine a couple of things about a sentence by asking some questions. We can determine the subject by asking who has the verb. Who has the verb? So that's as simple as, let me find the verb and ask who has it. All right, so for example, the sentence, John throws the ball. Okay, the question is, who or what throws the ball? The answer is John, and so that means that John is the subject. All right. The object can be determined by asking who gets the action. And this looks like, again, use that sentence. John throws the ball. John throws who or what? And the answer is, well, John throws the ball. So the ball is the object of the sentence. All right. So we have used nouns for this purpose up until today. Now we're starting to use pronouns to replace them. So here's your list of pronouns you are going to want to know. Ready? Le, la, les, me, te, nous, vous. You're going to notice that there are a couple that I'm not going to teach you this week, and that is simply because they have separate rules to them and we save them for French too. So, le means him or it. La means her or it. Les means them. Me means me. Te means you. Nous means us. Vous means you, plural, obviously. Pronunciation guide for each of them. Le, la, les, me, te, nous, vous. Le, la, les, me, te, nous, vu. Now, there are two other direct object pronouns, or rather, there are other pronouns that you're going to learn. They're indirect object pronouns. And so you will learn an additional two forms, lui and leur, when you get there. Lui means to him, leur means to them. We're not touching those. You'll see those probably pop up. We're not going to worry about those this go around, okay? So just throwing that out there, okay? But you will see them. So those are our direct object pronouns that we're going to need to know. Here are our rules of placement. Okay, there's quite a few of them, and I'm going to teach you these first, and then we're going to try the concept of like actually using them. All right, so one verb sentences first. Ready? Before the verb. Okay. And within the negative sandwich are the rules of placement. These guys are going to go before the verb within the negative sandwich if there is a negative sandwich to that. Okay. In questions, they're going to go before the verb in questions. Still. So that's going to be not as important when we use ESCA, but we use the whole concept of an inversion. That can get a little interesting, right? All right, so these are rules of placement. I'm probably going to need to create a separate board here in a minute with the rest of the rules of engagement, but we'll start with this. One verb sentences before the verb. Okay, here's an example. Je l'aime. I like him. All right, within the negative sandwich. Je ne l'aime pas. I don't like him. Before the verb in questions. L'aimes-tu? Do you like him? Okay. Rules of placement. One verb sentence before the verb, within the negative sandwich, before the verb in questions. Remember that we have the form esca, but it's not typically what's used anymore. Inversions are the big deal today. So keep that in mind. We might actually have enough room here if I just move this over here to this. There we go. Okay, so rules of placement then. Oops, where'd my board go? I accidentally clicked something wrong. Where'd it go? There it is. I think you could probably still see it, but I can. Okay, what about two verb sentences? These guys are fun. Two verb sentences. All right, ready? In between the two verbs. Crazy, huh? Between the two verbs. After the negative sandwich. All right. After the inversion. All right, so examples here. Between the two verbs. I like him. Je veux l'aimer. I want to like him. Now, these can be a little interesting to cope with as an American speaking English because we are used to the concept of having pronouns at the end of the sentence. Think of it like talking like Yoda. Okay, moves around his prepositions and everything and like his verbs and all of that. Same concept here. Okay, so two verb sentences between two verbs. I want him to like. Wow, it's very deep and profound, right? But again, kind of like Yoda. All right, so between the two verbs, after the negative sandwich. So let's go, je veux l'aimer. Let's change this. Je ne veux pas l'aimer. Still gonna go between the two verbs. Okay, still gonna go in between. And since the first verb is what ends up in the negative sandwich, right? Since it's sticking with the second one, it's sticking in between, it's not gonna end up in that negative sandwich. And then finally, after the inversion. Veux-tu l'aimer? Do you want to like him? You don't typically see inversions using je. Typically, if you're going to ask something, you use a rising intonation of je veux l'aimer. I want to like him is what you would typically do. All right. Final rules of thumb. Passé composé, because we've learned past tense, right? These are our other big boys. Here we go. Let's move you over here. Let's move you right here. And let's move you right here. Perfect. All right. So these guys. Passé composé. Passé composé. All right. Here's how it works. Before both parts of the past tense, we use avoir and then the past participle that we create from the infinitive form of the verb. It's going to go before both parts. Okay. With avoir form in negative sandwich. And after passé composé with two verbs. Okay. Let me move this over here and give you some examples over here. Yeah. All right. So before the parts of speech, or before both parts. Sorry, take me a second there. Je l'ai aimé. Okay, je l'ai aimé. with avoir form in a negative sandwich. A final monte after passive composé with two verbs. J'avais lu l'aimer means I wanted to like him. I wanted to like him. All right. Rules of placement. This is how these guys roll. Passé composé before both parts of the past tense. Je l'ai aimé. Okay. With avoir form in the negative sandwich. Je ne l'ai pas aimé. After passé composé with two verbs. J'avais lu l'aimer. All right. Now, I'm going to, of course, make sure I save these and everything. But with that in mind, I'm going to use the next whiteboard to actually come up with some sentences for you to play around with. And so what I want you to be able to do is I'm going to post these whiteboards. Try to look at the first whiteboard for the placement rules as you're working through this next part of the lecture. And don't look at the second whiteboard because that's this one right here that I'm going to be using. I'm going to give you some sentences in English and I'm going to let you put them into French. And then I'm also going to give you some sentences in French and I'm going to have you add the pronoun to where it needs to go appropriately. So that's what I'm going to do first. But I want you to be able to look at just that whiteboard of placement rules and try that out before looking at the answers on your own. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. But here are the ones in French. All right, French placement. Here we go. I'm gonna give you 4 because I'm not there with you. And what, again, like I'm wanting you to do, I'm gonna give you a sentence. I'm gonna give you a pronoun. I want you to place it appropriately with where you think it needs to go. All right, so here we go. Elle n'aime pas dire, and you're wanting to add me. So instead of saying she doesn't like to talk, it's she doesn't like to talk to me. Or she doesn't like me to talk. It's a bad example, actually. I don't like that example. There you go. You score. I just made it a little easier. Elle n'aime pas and ne. So she doesn't like me. Il a, which means he has, and you're wanting to say he has it. Add le appropriately. No, rien de rien. On Ali, we read, and I'm wanting you to add les, we read them. Finalement, n'as-tu pas écrit déjà? Haven't you written already? And I'm wanting you to say I'm going to say it's a letter, and so letter is feminine. All right, so take a second, work through these, pause the audio, go back, look at your rules, and then when you're done trying it out yourself, hit play again, and I'm going to show you the answers real fast. Okay. So hopefully yours looks like this. Elle ne m'aime pas. Il a. On les a lits. Ne l'as-tu pas écrit déjà? So if you're confused as to why those were the case, go back, look at the placement rules. If it still doesn't make sense, file it away for me, and we will address it in class next week, okay? Next exercise. I'm going to give you a sentence in English. You're going to put it to French. Ready? He likes it a lot. They are going with us, and I'm only going to give you 3 of these, okay? All right, so this one I'm going to tell you needs to be in past tense, just FYI, because that one might be a little tricky. So again, same concept. Hit pause on the audio. Give these a try. Hopefully they don't give you too much of a headache. Alrighty, give these a try. Try putting them from English into French. Take as much time as you need. And then when you're ready, come back and hit play, and I'm going to show you the answers. Should look like this. Il aime beaucoup. There should be an E at the end there. Mes excuses. Okay, they're going with us. Ils ne vont. All right, and did you read it again? Past tense. So l'as-tu mangé? Did you eat it? Sounds like me talking to my dog. Did you eat it? Really? Why did you eat it? It was your own hair, dog. Why did you eat it off the floor? Yep. All right. So with that having been said, I realized that I have run your brain through the ringers. So I'm going to save these. I'm going to stop sharing. This will conclude our lesson for this week. Have fun with this concept. I'm actually tempted to not give you writing homework, but actually give you some reading homework instead, using these concepts, obviously. I've got quite a lot of different books and stuff available here that have a lot of different like reading exercises and everything. And I like to shake it up sometimes so that it's not just always translation work. Translation work has its place, but I think a nice break every now and then is always welcome. So that's probably what I will end up doing this week for homework. That way we can focus on actually using this concept together in real time in class. All right, so I'll make sure that I get that posted. That'll be easier too because I'm getting on this recording a little later. So it's still, homework, but giving you a chance to like read through something. I know Duolingo has been having you do some stuff. I know you said that you've been listening to a lot of stories. I've got a lot of options for reading stories. So I don't know if you've done as much of that. If you have, yay, that's a good way to do it. It's a good way to pick up good French. So there you go. That concludes our lesson pour aujourd'hui. Merci pour entendre. Thank you for listening. And I will see you sometime next week.